You know, I come to poetry out of necessity in a way, right? Out of an urgent need to define who I am, but also as a way to give voice to my community. To me, poetry should be read out loud. And I encourage all of you to read a poem to a friend and have a friend read a poem to you. To me, poetry is how I stay alive, how I navigate the dark hours of the night. My poetry is an impure poetry. I hope that it is a poetry that is accessible and that you don't need a professor of literary theory to deconstruct it for you. In fact, I think my poetry resists deconstruction. Or as my friend said the other day, there isn't one extra word in it. Because poetry, after all, as the poet once said, is the best word in the best place. My work is at times bilingual or multilingual, and sometimes doesn't give a lingual or lengua, how it expresses itself, as long as it remains true to the word, as Eduardo Galeano says. And to paraphrase Galeano one more time, to think that poetry can change the world is absurd. But to think that the world can be changed without poetry is equally absurd. For me, though, poetry is also prophecy. Language fused to prophecy, that's poetry. So, if you permit me, I'll make a prophecy. And let's call this the prophecy of the poet laureate. And like all prophecies, it has to do with language. And the language that I'm concerned about right now is this question of this so-called immigration reform. Let me just gently point out that the 12 million Latinos in this country are neither illegal nor undocumented, but rather refugees. Refugees from the chaos, military, political, and economic chaos of Latin America, caused in large part by U.S. foreign policy. And the most recent example is the House of Honduras, burned down a couple years ago by our current administrator, President Hillary Clinton, etc. And since that coup a couple of years ago, Honduras has become the most violent country in the face of the earth. More violent deaths per thousand than Iraq, than Afghanistan, than Pakistan, than West Oakland, than La Mission. Yeah? And so the prophecy is this: it doesn't matter how high, how wide, how long you build that fence, as long as you keep burning down the houses of Latin America, those refugees are going to fly over that fence. So now that I got that off my chest, I think it's time for a love poem. Not all my poems are angry. Esta la voy a leer en español porque la escribí en español. And if you're linguistically challenged, I just said I'm going to read this in Spanish because I wrote it in Spanish. But all these poems are available in native tongue. If they're written in Spanish, they have the translation in English. If they're written in English, they just stay in English. This is for Magali y se llama Aquí con tu memoria. Oh, ya sabes esta. Hoy me senté pensativo, mirando al mar, atado como prisionero a otro día, enroscado, hecho caracol por todo fecundo que eres en esta tierra y este mar. el chillido de las gaviotas, las nubes como reflexión del agua, el cielo como tu caricia ese día de junio, de cual ha quedado solo este momento. Estos segundos, donde surges otra vez del mar, tu traje de baño, silueta de pura espuma, espléndida, joven, sirena de brazos bronceados, pelo color de arena quemada, mujer hecha de embrujos, de flores acuáticas, de tierra, montaña, hierbas, que ahora son poema, porque estuvimos juntos esa tarde y los dos fuimos hechos de calendarios, donde se retornan siempre los días con sus mismos destinos, los mismos amores y enemigos de siempre. Solo tú y yo quedamos, porque fuimos chorro de agua, música, el rubí de un beso cayendo hacia el fondo de un pozo, donde a través de los años nos miramos como éramos aquel día, pobres y enamorados de todo el mundo. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. In the old days, this would have been a bottle of tequila, right? In my bad days.